Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel, Taylor Talks Tales. Today I have a book review for you guys. This is on a book that has had a lot of mixed reviews and mixed thoughts and opinions. People seem to either be loving it or hating it and have a lot to say about it. It has been on my radar for quite some time, ever since I knew that this book was going to come out. It was a book I've been very interested in, and I kind of put off reading it just because I want to read some other books and because of the mixed reviews, but I always like to form my own opinion because there are some books out there that I love that other people hate and vice versa, so I figured, you know what, I'm going to just dive into this book and see what I think about it. So that book is on this beast of a tome, Imaginary Friend by Chbosky. This is his second published novel. His first one, of course, was Perks of Being a Wallflower, which is a hugely successful contemporary young adult novel, and also turned into a movie, which I love both. And I just want to show the fact that I just think it's really funny that this book is so tiny and this one is monstrous. Although not the biggest book, of course. I have actually bigger books in my collection, but, you know, it's still pretty large. Yeah, anyway, I'm going to read the inside flap and get right into this review, because I've got some things that I want to say as well. Single mother Kate Reese is on the run. Determined to improve life for herself and her son, Christopher, she flees an abusive relationship in the middle of the night with her child. Together they find themselves drawn to the tight-knit community of Mill Grove, Pennsylvania. It's as far off the beaten track as they can get. Just one highway in and one highway out. At first it seems like the perfect place to finally settle down. Then Christopher vanishes. For 6 long days, no one can find him, until Christopher emerges from the woods at the edge of town, unharmed but not unchanged. He returns with a voice in his head only he can hear, with a mission only he can complete. Build a treehouse in the woods by Christmas, or his mother and everyone in the town will never be the same again. Alright, so this book, I enjoyed it. I'm going to start off by saying I liked this book. I'm not in the camp of giving it a 5-star and being like, this is the most amazing thing ever, but I'm certainly not in the camp of giving it 1 or 2 stars and being like, this book was terrible. I can see why people feel very strongly about this book, and for me, I came into reading this as a horror fan. Like, I know there are some people who want to read it just because it's a Chbosky novel, and they aren't necessarily horror fans, so it was interesting to kind of see their thoughts and feelings on the book. And then, of course, there are some seasoned horror fans who were approaching this book, and there's just like a lot of different people who are reading this. And for me, I probably would actually give it 4 out of 5 star. And I'm going to say that I don't think that I think one of the biggest criticisms of this book is how long it is. And it is a very long book. Some people thought it wasn't necessarily, you know, it didn't need all the pages. They could have cut a lot out of the story. But I actually, as someone who reads a lot of Stephen King, I'm used to a longer book and a lot of different puzzle pieces coming together, because I feel like there are a lot of things that Chbosky sets up in the beginning part of the book and even the middle part of the book that come to play later. So I feel like maybe he could have shaved off like 100 pages of it, but I still feel like this is sort of a longer story to tell. And I didn't mind that part. And in fact, I feel like this book really reminded me a lot of Stephen King. And I know that a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's horror, so of course it'll remind you of Stephen King. I'm like, actually, when you've read a lot of Stephen King and you've read a lot of horror, you kind of get a sense of the writers that kind of take inspiration from Stephen King, but not all horror authors sound like him, because he has a very distinctive way of telling stories, of writing characters, of setting up a novel, of just, there's sort of this feel. I can usually tell, even if I just, you know, saw a book line open, and if I read a little bit, I'd be like, this reads like a Stephen King book, and then I'd pick it up and, you know, it would be a Stephen King book, so I could really pick out his writing. And I felt like I got a lot of that vibe from this book. I also got a lot of, like, Coraline vibes. Coraline was a favorite book of mine when I was younger, and I love the movie. It's one of my favorite, actually, it probably, I would say, is my favorite animated movie. I just think it's fantastic, and I just like the imagery in that story, and like the other world and the other mother and all of that, and they're just vibes of that in this book that I really enjoyed, because I think my favorite thing about this book is the imagery. Chbosky does a great job with his writing, and setting everything up, and his like the monsters, the creatures, the antagonists, just all the creepiness in this book is very vivid, and the imagery was fantastic. I loved it. There's like a scene with a ice cream truck where they're like passing out ice cream cones, but they have like their deer legs, like frozen deer legs instead, and like teeth on an ice cream cone. And there's just like a lot of images that really stick with you that are very vividly described. There are people with their eyes and mouths stitched up, and I thought that was very creepy. Just picturing this world was, I think, my favorite part of the book, and that's what kept me going. And it is a page turner of a novel, like especially when you get to the middle part and you're like, whoa, okay, what's going on, and you just want to keep going. So it does succeed at that. So even though this is 705 pages, for me it didn't feel like it was that big. I felt like it felt like a shorter novel because I was very engrossed in the story and what was going on. I did think, though, that it seemed to me like there were multiple climaxes in the story, which got a little annoying at times, especially once you hit the like 500 page mark, because I feel like if the story continued all the way like how it was in the beginning and middle part of the book, this might have been a 5-star read for me, but it did kind of take a bit of a nosedive towards the end of the book. It got kind of messy and convoluted and a little chaotic, and it was a little hard to follow, and of course with the continuous like climax, just there's like all this, and I'm like, okay, you know, let's take a breather here, let's figure out like, you know, what you want from this scene, because it just seemed like it was just like a little much, a little over the top. It was a bit rough of an ending. And in fact, I didn't really care for the ending, although it didn't ruin the book for me. Unlike The 10th Girl, and there are a couple other books I've read recently where like the ending was so bad that it ruined the book for me, I feel like I still enjoyed the book, and it was still a fun reading experience for me, that even though the ending was not what I wanted, nor was it great, and it was just all over the place and just, yeah, very chaotic and messy is how I describe it, I didn't think that it ruined the rest of the book. I guess a couple criticisms I have of it besides the ending, because the ending was not my cup of tea. But at the same time, if you've read Stephen King, you know that some of his endings are fantastic and other endings of his kind of miss the mark. So I kind of feel like I wasn't as crushed by a bad ending as I could have been if I hadn't already experienced books like that before, which had a really good setup and then poor execution. So criticisms I had of it, I felt like, so Christopher's supposed to be 7, and he didn't feel like a 7-year-old. And I know that, granted, he goes into this treehouse, he goes into this, you know, the forest, and he comes back out after 6 days, and he's kind of changed. He's no longer dyslexic, and he's super smart, and he's this genius kid. But I still feel like the rest of his friend group seemed like they should have been older. Like, I feel like the kids read more like they were 12 or 13 years old. And I felt like that type of book would have made more sense if he had aged the characters up a little bit. I just felt like second graders doing all the things that they were doing in this book, even if they were changed and became super geniuses, you still have like the emotional maturity and just physical size and capabilities and all of that. I just felt it struck me as being kind of weird. I also did not like the character of Mary Catherine. I felt like she was so stereotypical, and like her arc really bothered me. I just didn't like it, even though she was in a couple of scenes that were really creepy. Like, there definitely an element of like creepy deer in this book, which I thought was like really fun, especially because, you know, I've always thought that like deer are super cute, but they can be kind of creepy if you're like walking alone, and then you just see a couple deer off and you just see their glowing eyes, like, you know. So the whole like role that the deer play in this I liked, and Mary Catherine was in like at least a scene or two that involved deer, but for the most part I didn't like her character because of how, like, I just felt like it almost, maybe not necessarily slut shaming, but it just seemed like there was sort of this aspect of her sexuality that was like super hardcore Christian, because basically she's a stereotypical hardcore Catholic girl, and I didn't like that. some of the themes of her character. And that leads into why this book is probably not going to be for everybody, and that is the fact that there are a ton of religious themes in this book, like a lot. Now for me, I am not Christian. I come from sort of a Christian background, but I consider myself to be more of a spiritual person. I'm sort of exploring various pagan paths, and you know, I believe in spirits, but deities, I have no idea, but I'm not Christian. But I tend not to get bothered by certain themes necessarily, as long as it's not like you need to believe this, or it's like, if you don't believe, you're a terrible person, or you have to, like, I don't like people shoving things onto me, and I don't like to shove my beliefs onto other people. But I do feel like some of the themes in this, it would have been nice if it was like subverted or like changed a little bit, because I feel like the fact that it was kind of black and white and so like obvious towards the end of what it was like trying to convey, and the messages and the themes became a little like hokey, and I felt like, you know, this is a little cheesy, this is not what I really, you know, would have liked from this book, because it could have gone a totally different way, and I felt like that would have been really made it for more of a solid book. But I could kind of push away some of the themes. But if you are not religious and you get kind of are easily offended by like religious imagery and stuff, this is not the book for you at all. And I also think too that, yeah, I definitely would say some of those themes, they just play such a huge role, especially in the ending. And if you're the type of person who like has to have a really good solid ending for a book to enjoy it, this book is also not going to be for you, because it's kind of a mess. But at the same time, the reading experience was really fun up until that point, and even then, even when it was a mess, there were still like cool, creepy things happening, and there was still, you know, some like solid characters in the story that I enjoyed. So I thought that was fun, even though towards the end I was sort of like, WTF, like, whoa, this is a little bit, like, things are going in all these directions and so much is happening that it was a little hard to keep track of. So it was just sort of like, I'm on the ride and we're, you know, wrapping up and I'm still hanging on, but I'm a little confused as to what's going on. But yeah, I definitely think I enjoyed this, I guess, more than I thought I was, but less than I thought I was in a weird way, because I was sort of like thinking I was going to be in the camp of I'm either going to hate it or love it and have a lot to report on that. And for me, I thought it was fun. It was enjoyable for me to read up to a certain point, and then it got a little out there, a little weird, but I didn't hate it. I don't think that it's the, you know, there's so many people who are saying it's the worst book ever, and it's definitely, for me, not the worst book ever. I've read a lot. Trust me, I've read tons of like really awful, cheesy books out there, so so it was fun. I'm actually kind of glad I owned the book, even though I don't know, because of the length of it and because I know about the ending not working for me, I don't know if it'll be one I reread. I may reread at some point because it was enjoyable and atmospheric and all of that, but it's probably not going to be one I reread a whole lot. So yeah, and I definitely think if you enjoy Stephen King, and if you enjoy, you know, kids, like books centered around kids and good versus evil and like good imagery, you'll enjoy this book. Just know that there are religious themes to it. It's a long book and it's messy at the end. But yeah, and I guess the last thought I have is this really, funny enough, this kind of reminded me of Needful Things from Stephen King. I feel like of the Stephen King books, there are a little bit of elements of it in it, but I feel like there's also a lot of elements of Needful Things. I'm not going to go more into detail on that because that would be anything more would be a spoiler, but just know that there's like Needful Things vibes to it, and I liked that aspect a lot. And of course Coraline. So anyway, I better wrap up this review because it's getting kind of long, but thank you so much for watching this review. If you read Imaginary Friend, let me know what you thought of it. I know that it's a tricky book to review. It's hard for me to get my thoughts about this book just because there are like a lot of thoughts that I have, but a lot of it is also like it's not necessarily, I don't know. I enjoyed it, but it has issues. And it's not for everyone. It is not everybody's cup of tea, but it's worth a shot if you're willing to look past a couple of its issues and if you really want a kind of creepy, atmospheric book filled with weird images and images that stay in your mind very well. So please like, comment, rate, subscribe. Let me know if you've read this book in the comments below, and I will talk to you guys later. Thank you so much and happy reading.